This is going to be a big change of scenery than what we've been used to the last 3 or so years. The reason I say that is because today, what I wanted to do was talk about the Montreal Canadiens and talk about the upcoming 2025 NHL Draft. Now, making videos about the Habs has been somewhat of my full-time job. Habs, Canucks, Red Wings, you get the drill. But it's been my full-time job to do these videos since 2020, and I had been doing it colloquially on the side since 2017 in this hockey talk show capacity. But throughout these seasons, the Montreal Canadiens have had a pretty strong pattern of up and down. Because in 2018, the Montreal Canadiens had a top 3 pick in the draft. They had 3rd overall selected Jesperi Kotkaniemi, fantastic. In the 2019 draft, 2020 draft, and 2021 drafts, the Habs were not a top team in the entry draft selections. They drafted 15th overall Cole Caulfield, 16th overall Kaiden Guhle, and 31st overall Logan Mailloux. But then, in 2022, everything changed. Because the Habs, drafting Juraj Slafkovsky at number 1 in 2022, David Reinbacher at number 5 in 2023, and Ivan Demidov at number 5 in 2024. From 2022 onwards, the years have been filled with Habs draft speculation. Here are the top names in the NHL draft, and here's whom the Canadiens could draft. Last year, it was Caden Lindstrom and Beckett Seneca and Ivan Demidov. The year before that, we were talking about Reinbacher, we were talking about Matvei Mishkov. The year before that, it was Shane Wright or Juraj Slafkovsky. It was easy to dive into Montreal prospect draft talk because they were right at the top. But this year is going back to the same format that we had seen in 2019, 2020, and 2021, where the Habs are not really in the top conversation for draft picks, and instead are on the outside of the first half of the first round looking in. That's not an indictment against them. It's great that they were able to have a season that was such a big revival compared to the prior seasons they had had. But it opens the door to a different discussion this season about the Montreal Canadiens and their draft pick plans. It's been no secret that on this YouTube channel we haven't been making many Why I Want videos, and that's mostly by design. I've said it multiple times throughout the year, but Why I Wants were always a lot more engaging to make when we were legitimately looking at some of my favorite teams that would have had the chance to draft these guys. But 24-25 was different because the Montreal Canadiens, the Detroit Red Wings, and the Vancouver Canucks were all relatively competitive in the playoff race. Sure, not all of my favorite teams ended up making it, but they were kind of hanging tight towards the end there, and as a result, none of my favorite teams were real draft lottery top pick contenders. Now we're looking at Montreal, the team that got the first overall pick just a few years ago, and saying, hey, they've got picks number 16 and 17 in the 2025 selection. One of those picks is their own, the other is Calgary's. But ultimately, the conversation as to whom it is the Habs should draft is a lot more difficult now compared to where it was last year or the year before. There are a number of names that you could toss out there that will or may not be available in the 16th or 17th overall spots. There are different values if you want to talk about need versus best player available. Can you even dive into best player available when you reach outside the top 10? This year's draft class isn't seen as a particularly great one, so are Habs fans going to be diving deep and dissecting each of the prospects and trying to make sure which one is the best one with this crop like they did last year with Demidov and Seneca and Lindstrom? I don't know. It's an entirely other conversation and one that we hadn't seen in about 4 years for the Montreal Canadiens in regards to the prospects and the draft picks, which is why I wanted to talk about the idea of making a trade. Because it's been brought up on a few other outlets, the discussions as to the Canadiens and their first-round picks and their center core and what they need on the team right now. And the question is, if you draft a guy 16th, 17th overall, what are the odds that that guy ends up becoming a guaranteed player for you? I'd say it's reasonably high, but it's not guaranteed. maybe like a 60% chance, 60-70% chance that that player becomes an NHL player, maybe a 40 or 35% chance that that player becomes a good player, and then maybe like a 10 or 15% chance that that player becomes a superstar. Maybe even less than that. Who really knows? So, if you have 2 draft picks that have that kind of a chance to get a player that's meaningful in the National Hockey League, then is there not an opportunity for the Canadiens to leverage that? Would you like to see the Canadiens trade both of the picks? 16th and 17th, maybe with the Utah Hockey Club, for example, to move up to 4th overall? 16th and 17th to get yourselves a second-line prospect without having to sacrifice any of the guys that are on the team right now? Is there a world where the Habs are able to build off of the exact same roster as they had this previous season, spare, of course, some of the guys that are destined to leave, like David Savard, and just add on a bona fide top 6 caliber talent with the 2 draft picks and maybe somebody else? If you really wanted to stretch it, you wanted to say, okay, well, if a super valuable name like a Sidney Crosby or a Malkin or a McTavish or a Zibanejad or somebody out there is out on the market, if they label the price as 2 firsts from Montreal, number 16 and 17, do you take it? Might I remind you, the Habs had another first-round pick that was traded for a center just a few years ago. For a very brief moment in time, the Habs had a first-round pick from the Islanders that they had acquired in the Alexander Romanov trade. But then they quickly flipped it over for Kirby Dach. Now I get it, not the same circumstances, you can't compare every trade to each other and make it seem like they're all the same, but there is a history that Kent Hughes has displayed when it comes to trading these picks away. And I'm also starting to think now, like, the Habs have had multiple first-round picks in multiple years of the drafts recently too. Michael Hage and Ivan Demidov, Yuri Slafkovsky and Philip Mayshar. There are enough guys in the prospect pool already that I think are good enough. There's no guarantee that you're going to get yourselves a player that is guaranteed better than those players at 16th or 17th. Would it not be interesting to explore what you could get for both the 16th and 17th overall picks in another trade for a roster caliber forward right now? I'm really starting to dive into it, and I think that there have been enough conversations on social media about this idea that I wanted to make a commentary about it. And sure, I didn't use any particular tweets or whatever just to make this point because it's a pretty simple video topic, but I do think we can get a good conversation going when it comes to this kind of stuff. Do you think the Montreal Canadiens should, would, or could trade both of their 16th and 17th overall picks at the NHL draft? Would that be better? Would it depend on the return? Depending on the return, when you think about the players that could come back, do you find yourself more inclined to do this? Let me know in the comments section, would you rather see the Habs draft 2 guys in the middle first round or try to package that for a roster player in the now to help the team in that same Newhook, Barron, Doc age range? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.